Amid Aleph. Chafei Amid Aleph. We began the Gemara yesterday. We're going to pick it up from there, 4 lines from the bottom. We're in the middle of discussing Oisek b'mitzvah, Pater min ha-mitzvah. And yesterday we brought that the Makar for Oisek b'mitzvah, Pater min ha-mitzvah is from where? B'sheves u'beleches. The Torah does not say. What does the Torah say? B'shiftecha b'veisecha. You're sitting and you're going. That's when there's an obligation to read Shema. Whereas when you're doing God's sitting and Hashem's going, then you are pater from saying Shema, and that's called doing a mitzvah. So ask the Gemara 4 lines in the bottom. Va'isik b'mitzvah, pater min ha-mitzvah, mehacha nafka. Do we learn it out from over here? Mehasam nafka. We learn it out from over there. Where is over there? The Tanya we learned in the Brayso v'yanoshim shayu t'meim l'nefesh adam. And there were the people. We said a very timely pasuk. This is Pesach Sheni. The people that were tamei to a nefesh, that were tamei to a corpse by the regular Karban Pesach, they were allowed to bring the Pesach Sheni. Oisam anashim mihayu. Who were these people who were tamei by the original Pesach? Says the Gemara Machlokes. The first opinion which we began yesterday is Rav Yosef Aglili that teaches Noisei Aronei Shel Yosef Ayu. They were the carriers of the Aron of Yosef. They became tamei by carrying his Aron out of Mitzrayim. And now when the Karban Pesach came, they were still tamei, and therefore they are allowed to bring the Pesach Sheni. Divrei Rav Yosef Aglili. We turn over to Chavei Amid Beis and says the Gemara, Rabbi Akiva Omer says Rabbi Akiva, no, it was not the carriers of the Aron of Yosef. Rather, Mishael of El Tzafan Hayu. It was Mishael and El Tzafan, and this is beautiful Siyata D'Shmaya because
they carried it,
they became tamei from carrying the Aron of Yosef, and comes Pesach and they're tamei. So they come to Moshe Rabbeinu. What should we do? Moshe Rabbeinu says, you get a second chance in a month from now, Pesach Sheni. Rabbi Kiva says, no, it was Mishael and El Tzafan. Hayu. Mishael and El Tzafan were the ones that dealt with the bodies of Shaya Oiskim. They were dealing with Bin Nadav and Avihu, which is this week, next week's Parashiyah, Sav and Shemini, is the death of Nadav and Avihu. And that's what Mishael and El Tzafan were doing. They were busy dealing with, that's why they were tamei, so they couldn't bring the Karban Pesach. They couldn't bring the Karban Pesach. Rav Yitzchak Omer, excuse me. So we have 2 opinions. Who were the people that brought the Pesach Sheni? Rav Yitzchak Omer, asked Rav Yitzchak, Im noisei Aronei Shel Yosef Ayu. If it was those who were carrying the Aron of Yosef, Kavar Hayu Yechoylin Litoyer. They were already able to become tar. What does that mean? When did they become tamei? When they left Mitzrayim. When was the first Karban Pesach brought? Many months later. So they had a time to become tar. If Mishael and El Tzafan Hayu, if it was Mishael and El Tzafan, when was Mishael and El Tzafan? When did they become tamei? So look at Rashi, and this is the beautiful Siyata D'Shmaya. Rashi says, when was it? Shori be'echad b'Nisan hukam ha-Mishkan. That's this week's parsha. That's Parshat Tzav. Tzav is the Akamas HaMishkan, the building of the Mishkan, which happened on the 1st of Nisan. That's when Nadav and Avihu were burnt. That's when Mishael and El Tzafan became tamei. How many days does it become tahar? 7 days. 7 days after the 1st of Nisan is the 7th of Nisan. Pesach is the 14th of Nisan. So why did they not bring the Karban Pesach? And Mishael and El Tzafan Hayu Yecholin Hayu Litoyer. So Ella, so rather, says Rabbi Yitzchak, and this is the Makar, this is the source that we're looking for. Oiskin b'meis mitzvah hayu. Who were the people that were not able to bring the original Karban Pesach? People that were dealing with meis mitzvah. Now usually, what does meis mitzvah mean? Meis mitzvah means is a body lying on the road, there's no relatives, so even a kohen is allowed to become tamei. Rashi over here points out that's not really what it means over here. It just means someone that had Rachmana litzlan, a relative that was nifter right before Pesach. And what's the case? Says the Gemara, Shechal Shvi Shelahen, their 7th day of their tahira process. We know it requires 7 days to become tar. On the 3rd and the 7th day, you sprinkle the ashes of the para aduma, and then you go to the mikvah, and then you become tar. So the 7th day was when? Liyos be'erev Pesach. Was on Erev Pesach. And that was when, on Erev Pesach, is when you shecht the Karban Pesach. Parenthetically, we point out, the reason why in Erev Pesach you're not allowed to do melacha after Chatzos, what melacha most importantly for all of us is shaving. You can't shave, you can't cut your nails. After Chatzos and Erev Pesach, a very unknown halacha until someone sends you the message 2 minutes after Chatzos. By the way, you can't cut your nails or shave after Chatzos. And then I get the message, Rabbi, how real is this halacha? Because I just missed Chatzos. So we try to avoid that. But where does it come from? It's fascinating to know where it comes from. Because Erev Pesach, what are you busy with? Not your nails, not your shaving, the Karban Pesach. You're shechting the Karban Pesach. So in commemoration, and we're hoping it's going to happen again, we don't do any malacha. So back to our Gemara. Shechal Shvi Shalai Noi Erev Pesach, the 7th day of their Tahira process, fell on Erev Pesach. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, they were not able. Who was not able? These people that were tummy. What were they tummy from? Says Rav Yitzchak. It wasn't the Aaron of Yosef. It wasn't Nadav and Avihu, Mishal and Elsaf. And who were they? Any random Joe Shmo that unfortunately a relative is nifter. And v'lo yachlu, they were not able la'asayis Pesach to bring the Karban Pesach by Yoimahu. On that day, on which day? On Erev Pesach. Says the Gemara we darshan. By Yoimahu, only on that day they couldn't bring the Pesach. Holim Machar, but tomorrow, they could have brought the Karban Pesach. End of very lengthy brisa. What do we see? We see that these Jews that a relative died 7 days before Pesach, and they know if they go and become Tameh, what's going to happen 7 days from now? Are they going to be able to bring the Karban Pesach? No. Why not? Because they're going to be Tameh. They're still allowed to go become Tameh. Why? Oisek b'mitzvah, pater min mitzvah. So this is the end of the question, right before the word sricha. So asks the Gemara, this lengthy brisa, what are we asking? We just quoted that what's the source that when you're doing one mitzvah, you're pater from another mitzvah? B'shiftecha, u'b'lechtecha, when it's your going, when it's your sitting. Ask the Gemara, no. We see another brisa. The brisa says that you're allowed to become tamei, l'tamei meis, and you don't have to worry about the fact that you're not going to bring the Karban Pesach. Why? Oisek b'mitzvah, pater min mitzvah. So why do we need our source if we already have another source? That is the end of the question. Now, before people, I'm already starting to see minds already picking up that there are fine nuances that are different between the two cases. They're not exactly comparable. So says the Gemara and answers the Gemara, Sricha. No, we need both sources. So we're going to come out from today that when someone asks you, what is the makar, what is the source for Oisek b'mitzvah, pater min mitzvah, when you do one mitzvah, you don't have to do another one. There's two sources. One source is b'shivtecha uvelechtecha, and the other source is Karban Pesach Rishon / Pesach Sheni. Why do we need two sources? Suricha. If we only had the source from over there by the Karban Pesach, what would I have thought? Mishum. The reason is because the Laimata Zman Chiyuva de Pesach. The Laimata Zman, the time did not come of the obligation of the Chiyuv of the Pesach. Meaning, when they became Tamei 7 days prior, at that moment, did they have the obligation of Karban Pesach sticking in their face? No. At that moment, they had nothing. So one would think maybe the only reason why they were allowed to become Tamei was because at that moment there was no mitzvah. So at that moment, what were their options? Do the mitzvah of burying the dead or do nothing. So do the mitzvah. Let's remind ourselves, where in the world did this come into? This is shluchei mitzvah. This is a chayla that you're pater from sukkah. But by us, if you go to the hospital, you take that solid call, you're not going to be able to go and make kiddush on the first night of sukkah. How are you allowed to take that at solid call? The answer is chaylu misham shameim are pater min sukkah. Oisek b'mitzvah, pater min mitzvah. Aval hocha dimata zman kriya shema. The zman's here. You have the mitzvah of sukkah. You have Kriya Shema right in front of your face. Emaloi, you would say no. Maybe you're not allowed to go and do one mitzvah which is going to override another mitzvah. Sricha, so we need both cases. And now we say the flip side. V'yashminan hacha. And if we only said the makar over here by Kriya Shema, mishum deleka karis. How bad is it if you miss Shema? Okay, you violated a mitzvah daraisa. But did you commit something that has karis of the most severe punishments? The answer is no. So you would think the reason why you're allowed to do a mitzvah, kindness as a basula, get married and miss Shema, is why? Because there's no karis. Aval hasam, but by karban bezach, de'ika karis. You're being posed by karis. When this guy goes and becomes tummy 7 days before Pesach, what's he missing out of? The karban Pesach, which has a violation of krisos. Emalai, you would think you're not able to, sricha, and therefore we need both cases. So why do we need two different sources? Because each one has a fine nuance that does not exist by the other. Pesach has a nuance that maybe you're only allowed to do it because the chiyuv didn't come yet. Kriya Shema has a nuance that it's not the severity of a krisa. So says the Gemara, we have two different sources, Isaac b'mitzvah, pater min mitzvah, and that is why ultimately, when someone is shluchei mitzvah, you're going to do a mitzvah, you're pater from sukkah, the chaylu misham shemeim are pater from sukkah, or from these two sources. We're going to stop over here before Kufa, Mir Tashem over Shabbos. We should do a Gevaldik Chazara of the last, from Ma'isa Sukkasai. That's where we started this week, Chavdal Amid Beis, the Mishnah, and Mir Tashem Monday night.